Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to All Together, the Family Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargent. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to the show. For countless parents, handling estrangement from children is what I can only imagine to be a heartbreak that stands the test of time, riddled with questions like, should I reach out? Why won't they reach out? Why did this happen to me? Where did I go wrong? They hurt me too. Will they ever see that they hurt me? When will they come to their senses? Can I reach out? And unfortunately, for better or for worse, these questions can only ever truly be answered through thoughtful reflection and reconnection. It's not something that anyone else can tell you how to do things. So today on Altogether, the Family Science Insights podcast, we'll be exploring one of the most painful and complex experiences a parent can face, which is estrangement from an adult child. And to guide us through this is psychotherapist and estrangement specialist Tina Gilbertson, who specializes in supporting parents of estranged adult children. She's also the founder of the Reconnection Club, the essential online resource for parents going through this. So we're thrilled to have her on the show with us today. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you so much, Marie. Great to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really keen to talk about this. But before we begin, tell us about your backgrounds and what sparked your interest in estrangement.
Well, it's probably been more than 10 years ago. Actually, it's been more like 20 years ago. I was just a regular therapist working with adults, and I discovered that a lot of my clients were not talking to their parents. And when I would ask them about it, they would tell me that their parents wouldn't understand. They can't talk to them, and I realized that there were probably parents on the other side wondering what was going on with their children and really not understanding why. So that really struck me as a problem, and so I started doing a little bit of writing on my website about what to do if someone doesn't talk to you, and I just started hearing from parents just in droves. Who were suffering because their adult children just had cut ties or were just the relationship was frosty and they didn't know what to do. And I thought, well, I have a lot of information, at least on my side, from my clients about some of what goes wrong in these relationships. And I really felt drawn to. I felt a lot of compassion for the parent on the other side who really had no idea what was going on and maybe needed some help to understand. And so that's how I was introduced to the topic in the first place, was just as a therapist working with what I thought was a general population. And it only occurred to me later that my own grandmother was estranged from her parents. And that's something I
Yeah.
had forgotten.
Yeah, it's actually so common, and I think it's a lot more common than we realize. I've seen a few of my own family members kind of estrange themselves from their parents, and the parents might view it as a frosty relationship, but don't really think it's like estrangement kind of level. So they still keep reaching out, and they still keep trying to, perpetuate the same behaviors and attitudes that they have been their entire parenthood, mainly because they don't know that there's anything going wrong. They don't know how frustrated the child is. But I'm curious to know, what are some of the most common reasons that adult children choose to become estranged from their parents from your experience?
There are a lot of different contributing factors that are cited in the research. And I think there's usually actually a cluster probably of reasons rather than a single reason, but anything from divorce to financial issues to sibling rivalry to romantic relationships to just disagreements, differences in values. But I think what it comes down to most often is a feeling in the adult child of not being either accepted or understood or even or loved, in the way that they can feel. And that is heartbreaking when parents hear that, because they don't there's a disconnect. The parents
Yeah.
feel that love, but the adult child does not, isn't receiving it, or doesn't it's a mismatch in the communication.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I do experience this with my own parents as well. Sometimes their love language is kind of like teaching me things and lecturing me about certain things. But there's some topics where I'm just like, I'm a full grown adult and I have my perspective on it. And I want to share that part of myself with them. But every time I do, it ends up in some kind of life lesson that I personally don't agree with, and it stresses me out. So I imagine, like, for people who experience this to like a much like deeper and like more frequent level, they would experience it a lot more and feel a lot more strongly about it, which could result in that estrangement. So I think that's an excellent preface for our topic for today. But before we go further into detail and unpack a little bit more, I would love to get to know you better. So this is Have You Met Tina? And this is going to be a rapid fire icebreaker of sorts where I'll say a word and you tell us what comes to mind. So please try your best to answer them within a few words if possible. The first one here is book.
This is going back a ways. Emotional Resilience by David Viscott.
Movie?
I don't have a movie. I don't have a movie, but I have another book. Mindfulness by Ellen Langer.
Sure. Close enough. Some books get turned to movies, so you'll never know. Podcasts?
Like Mind, Like Body for chronic pain.
Role model?
My mother. She's brilliant. She's kind. She's curious. She's wonderful.
And a course or a class that you've taken that has stuck with you to this date?
Very random. The physiology of exercise and nutrition. That's where I learned that exercise is useless for weight loss.
And what is the most important lesson that you've learned from all of this?
From all of those combined,
Yeah.
wow. Maybe the importance of knowing the truth about things.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I think now is a good time to go into the interview. And for starters, I would love to jump into defining some key terms. Firstly, how would you define family?
Well, I know that different people would define family in many different ways, but for my purposes and for the people I work with, family is simply the people who raised you.
Yeah. And how would you define family estrangement?
Again, this is a term that is not universally agreed upon. For me, estrangement is a strained or tense relationship that is unfulfilling, that is painful, that is just not fulfilling its potential for at least one of the people involved, usually
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. And are there like different levels to estrangement?
Well, that's an interesting question. You could think of a continuum of estrangement, but it's really hard to measure, because you might say, well, on the mild end, you don't call your parents as often as you would, and on the extreme end, it's complete and total cutoff, right? But sometimes, even for when there's a lot of contact, the emotional aspects, the sense of alienation, the separation is severe. There is just an absolute wall up, even if there is contact. So I don't think there's a nice continuum that we can easily define or
Yeah.
identify.
Yeah, for
But yeah,
sure.
there's a lot of variety in estrangement, anywhere from we talk every day, but the relationship is tense and troubled and difficult, and it's always hard, and or it's on and on again, off again, all the way from I haven't heard from my child for years, or I haven't
Yeah, for
heard from my parent
sure.
for years.
Yeah. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, I know a couple of people who are sort of on not very good terms with their parents, and they don't really communicate that often. And when they do, whenever they do though, there is always like a fight about to ensue. There's always this weird tenseness around, and either one of them is complaining about the other. So that might not be like what fits into the traditional, I suppose, definition of estrangement, but it's definitely in my mind estrangement territory. Just because like emotionally you are estranged, it might be physically there, but emotionally totally off. Um,
Exactly. That's true in
yeah.
my mind as well. That is what I call emotional estrangement. You're there, you're in it every day, but there's a gulf emotionally.
Yeah. And how would you describe the relationship between family and estrangement?
I don't think there's a necessary relationship. Like estrangement can happen in theory in any relationship. You don't have to be family to be estranged. But I think estrangement happens mostly in families because there are expected connections and ties and bonds within families, and so it's estrangement goes very much against that, and that's where it's highlighted is in families. And of course it can affect not just the person or people. Sometimes it's like one child and one parent. This child speaks to all his or her siblings and speaks to mom but not dad. you know um, but there's a lot of what I call collateral damage, where other people sometimes also, you might think of them as innocent bystanders, younger siblings, grandparents, and they can also be very, very much affected by estrangement. So it really can have an impact on the whole family, and it typically just it does. Not meaning that typically there's a lot of collateral damage, but that of course it affects the entire family when you have estrangement between any two members.
Yeah, I'd say that that is a pretty good reason why it's important to understand the importance of knowing, well, I don't want to use understanding, I guess. Understanding family estrangement, that like that bit is really important because there might be collateral damage. Like, you can control your own relationship with someone else and you can decide this for yourself, but you also have to kind of think about what about the people around you? How are they being affected by this? And of course, that's not to say like, you put everyone else's needs above your own, but it's something to like consider. But what would you say are some of the important things to consider about family estrangement? What's the importance of understanding it?
I think it's very important to realize, first of all, that you're not alone if you're experiencing this. A lot of people feel like, and they're surrounded by people who are in close contact with their families, and so they do feel like the only one. And the fact is, family estrangement is not rare, and it's been around. As I was saying to you before we started recording, my grandmother was estranged from her parents. This is 100 years ago we're talking, and estrangement is mentioned in the Bible. I mean, it's not a new phenomenon. So if this is something that's affecting you, it's important to understand that this is a part of many families' lives. It's also something that can run in families. So if there was estrangement, in your parents' generation, or uh, unfortunately, children learn what they live, and when they see their parents and grandparents struggling, they can learn those. We can talk about that maybe a bit later as kind of a worst case where the children are also learning about estrangement. But it is something to recognize as something that can happen in families, and it's so important to try, if you're up for it, to do what you can to be that generation where it stops.
Yeah. And what are the most common misconceptions about family estrangement?
I think one of the most common, I just wrote an article about this, so it's fresh in my mind, is the idea that estrangement is kind of just like the silent treatment. Like an adult child who steps away is punishing. the parent for some perceived wrongdoing or inadequacy. And estrangement is not the silent treatment. It is completely different in many ways, particularly in its purpose. The silent treatment is to punish. You did something that I don't like. I'm punishing you. I'm not going to talk to you for some time. And when the treatment has had its effect, then I'll talk to you again. That's the silent treatment. It is not estrangement. Estrangement is, this isn't about you. I need to step away. There's something going on here that I can't, that's not sustainable for me. I don't know what to do about it. I'm going to remove myself. If it hurts you, I'm sorry, but that's not the purpose. Estrangement is typically a self-protective act, and something that people engage in after soul searching, and it's hard. It's a hard decision to make.
Yeah, I need to protect my peace, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what do parents often struggle with when they're estranged from their children?
Oh, wow. I mean, so many terrible feelings of grief and sadness, despair, shame, humiliation. There's stigma. If your own child doesn't talk to you, what a terrible person/parent you must have been. There may be outrage, anger, resentment. How can you do this? I've given you so much and I'm not asking for a lot back. And yet you can't even return a text. You can't take 5 seconds to return. So there can be this big range of awful, awful feelings that parents are left with no end in sight. That's what is so devastating about
Yeah.
estrangement from the parents' side. And the adult child on their side, they have pain as well. It's just because they make the choice doesn't mean that they're loving it or happy. And, it's not a perfect solution, but it is the only one that at a certain point in the relationship, it's the only one or the best one, the best option available, it seems.
Yeah. And what should estranged parents try to understand before attempting to reestablish contact?
Oh, there's a big, big question. Just the idea that there is something to understand before you try to establish contact. That's something that I try to get across a lot in all of my work is contact is not the solution to estrangement. Okay? Contact was part of the problem, whatever it is, involved contact. So reaching out and reestablishing contact, that's not going to solve the problem. In order to reach out, you want to, for it to stick, if you want to reconcile, you and your child both want it to stick. You've got to understand how you got to this place where your child stepped away. So there's so many things to understand. And many times parents say, well, my child isn't talking to me. How am I supposed to know? I have no idea what the problem is. But there are ways to get good information. There's your own memory of interactions that you've had. And then there's so much to learn about the parent-child relationship, the modern parent-child relationship. And you can, and so much to learn about yourself as somebody's child, and how what happened for you is a model for what happened when you became a parent. There's so much to learn and understand, but it's not rocket science. This is learnable. It's learnable, and but parents, they're in such a hurry, like, oh my gosh, I've got to reconnect with my child because she's moving further and further away with every day that passes, right? I've got to reach out. I've got to reach out. But they're neglecting the work that would actually make it possible to reconnect because they're in such a hurry to, regain that contact. They don't start where they are and do the work that's required before contact will be successful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like there are also so many different things that parents kind of misconstrue about the estrangement in the sense of like, I mean, from what I've witnessed from, my own family members and friends, where I suppose the estranged parent would kind of view the child who is growing more distant to be just, they're my child, and they have to be close to me. I have to keep talking to them. I have to be, because that's what parents and children do, full stop. And at the end of the day, we're family. That's it. And we have to be family. And you can't just like be estranged from me. If you like grow emotionally distant, that's your issue, and you have to fix that. And that's kind of the length, the extent that the conversation kind of goes to. And I don't know, I feel like what would be really helpful is just for a parent to kind of view the child as their own human being, like, yes, they're part of the family unit, but at the end of the day, they're their own grown person, and they have their own experiences, they have their own beliefs and values. What do you think about that?
Yes, but in order for the child to be her own person, the parent has to also be his or her own person. Like for me to recognize you as an autonomous human being with feelings and thoughts and valid other opinions, I have to recognize myself in that same way and give myself the respect, the validation, and everything. And if I was raised by parents who kind of just, if I towed the line and said, well, I've got to take care of my parents, there is no dissent, there is no going away or having a mood, there's nothing. If I had to toe the line with my parents, that's my model, that's all I've got. And so why aren't you doing that? I did that, and my parents were 10 times worse to me than I've been to you. So sometimes that's what we're dealing with is the parent has a pretty limited experience himself or herself, and then for the adult child to say, hey man, I got to be me, that bumps right up against the parent saying, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to be me. But it's all, it's this is not conscious necessarily. There's a
Yeah,
lot
no,
of
and
unconscious stuff that goes on.
yeah, yeah, and I really imagine it to be so difficult purely for the fact of like, for however many decades that you're raising this child of yours, you have been taught, and you have to kind of be parent first for that long of rearing a child, and then so like through the adult years when it's becoming like an empty nest, or the child has to find their own place in the world, and they might be emotionally distant, all of a sudden it feels like such a quick and drastic switch, and it feels difficult to it's like change. Well, I actually don't know how to drive. I was going to say changing gears, but I don't actually know what changing gears is like.
But
But
yeah,
it's like going from riding a it's like going from driving a car to driving a manual truck. Is it?
sure,
Can you
sure, why not?
confirm that?
I
Have you
mean,
ridden a truck?
yeah, I mean, for some people, in some cases, that's the issue. Is the parent is so used to being in that parent role and being everything to the child and for the child, and they're not sure how who who they are if they're not parenting that child. How do they stay in their lives? How do they stay relevant if they're not helping or teaching or guiding?
Yeah,
So
no,
sometimes that's the issue.
and to be fair, if I was a parent and I spent half of my life raising a child and they're fully grown now, they're great human being, I would feel so accomplished and so proud of myself, and I would totally want to hold on to that. But what do you think are some other things that estranged parents misconstrue or misunderstand about the reasons behind the estrangement?
Well, first of all, I think they they get confused about the reasons. Like, I asked my daughter for some help with my computer, and she flew off the handle and said, "Stop calling me." Like, what's that about? So they all they recognize is the thing that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, but they don't realize that reasons are probably multiple and ongoing. It's usually not a thing or an event. It's usually a theme. The child may feel criticized by the parents continuing, and this is sort of a setup. There are a lot of children who have learning difficulties or health problems that do need assistance. They need some extra attention. And when the parents may have some anxiety about that, they get the child a tutor. They go after the child with their medicine all the time, or whatever it is. They give that child the attention that they feel they need to give for the child to thrive. And unbeknownst to them entirely, the child is taking that as criticism, as I'm not good enough for you. You want me to be someone I'm not. You know. So when a child gets really angry at something that seems that a parent could tell someone else, can you believe that my son yelled at me about this? And the other person's like, oh, your son sounds like an idiot. Why would he yell about that? It's not about that thing. It's about some theme, some ongoing dynamic, an undercurrent in the relationship that the parent is probably not even aware of. So that's why it's so confusing. Like, wow. What I often hear is, I did so much for my child. And they did. Until you're a parent, you don't know how much sacrifice, how much energy, and all of that goes into raising a child. They did so much, and yet this one thing, or what the parent is aware of is this one thing or this issue. Why can't I be forgiven this one thing when I did all these other things well? And
Yeah.
again, that kind of goes back to, like, this isn't a silent treatment. This isn't a punishment. And also, it's not, this little one thing that's an intellectual idea for you is a whole soup that your child is drowning in. So, yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding about the reasons for estrangement.
Yeah, and I think for what comes to mind for me personally is that for some context, my parents used to be pretty harsh in terms of disciplining me as a child. I was the firstborn child, so naturally they were a little bit more harsh than my siblings. And they were pretty harsh. They used some physical forms of discipline when I was younger. I obviously didn't really appreciate it very much, and I was also like left alone for like quite a while. So I was pretty independent from when I was young because my two parents were working, which is not like uncommon, but still. And I remember like a few instances where I was like a few particular instances where I was like, I don't like this at all. And I've kind of like brought it in with me through my entire life of like, this is what my early childhood looked like. And that kind of formed the basis of my identity and also part of the reason why I kind of grew emotionally distant from my parents, while still like, admiring them from afar, but still feel like I have to keep my distance because sometimes these behaviors, not the physical part, but like the more like aggressive, like authoritarian kind of attitude, I guess, still comes up. And I don't think this is a very like uncommon thing for people to go through at all. But what I really appreciated about my parents is that when I brought it up some time ago, it was pretty recent, and it did take a while for us to get there, but I did bring it up and I was like, remember how you used to do this, um, in kind of like a like joking manner. I won't lie, it was a little bit passive aggressive and totally not necessary. But what I really appreciated was that my parents actually said sorry about it and was like, hang on, I don't remember that happening at all. And then they thought a bit further, they reflected a little bit and was like, oh wait, I do remember that. This one other instance as well. I smacked you because you were putting your finger in the socket. So like, to be fair, it wasn't like I wasn't just sitting there and they decided to smack me. They did it out of like frustration, but still, I guess as a child, you don't really process the socket part, right? Like you process what's actually happening, which is your parents just hitting you. Yeah. And they actually said sorry for that. They apologized and they gave me a hug. And from there, I felt a lot better about it and a little less like closed off, just like knowing that, like, they might not have always been the so-called like perfect parents in my mind, but the fact that they're trying is all that matters to me. And the fact that, over time they were less harsh about it. And I unfortunately, for some parents, don't see that happening, and some relationships are not as fortunate as mine. So what is your advice for either parents or children who might be going through this kind of situation where either of the party is not really understanding what needs to be done to like kind of bring the bond a little bit closer?
Well, I mean, I love that your parents apologized to you when you brought that to them. That and as you said, that had an impact on you, right? It made a difference than if they had said, "I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened." Which some parents do say because they are absolutely convinced that something didn't happen. It's important, I think, to if you hear something that you feel or know didn't happen, it's important to ask, where is this coming from? My child is willing to believe that we left them alone for hours and hours when they were 5, or they're willing to believe that they were physically hurt by us. What is required right at this minute of a parent whose child is convinced of that? In that moment, you're not in court, you're in your relationship, and your child is actually needing something from you in that moment. And when your parents apologized to you, that was validating. you know that's like, yeah, that happened, it shouldn't have happened, we're very sorry. So that's a wonderful model right there. And I've forgotten the question.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to know what is your advice for any people, parents or children who might be going through a similar situation, but their relationships aren't as fortunate as mine, where, the other party was willing to recognize where the mistake happened.
I think, we only have access or control over ourselves. We have to start with ourselves in relationships to be the change that we want to see. Um, and so, I was saying earlier that a lot of parents, they have a model that for them, that they were physically disciplined as children. That's what they know to do. And so they do it, and they're working within a certain box that says this is parenting, or they're working outside the box of their own parenting. I hear that a lot too. I did not want to be like my parents. I did exactly the opposite. But even working outside of the box, you're still working from the same box, the same blueprint, right? So there are very often places to go inside of yourself before you try to work through stuff with your parents or your children. You really want to kind of clean house on the inside. You never get to a perfect place where everything is ideal, but there can be a lot of sorting through, a lot of understanding of your own experience, because if you cannot face your own truth, you're not going to be able to hear the other person's truth either. It's going to be too hard. It's going to kick up painful things that there's a part of your mind that says, I don't want to go there. So you can't go. I can't hear it. So really, it's a lot of shame gets in the way when people sit down and try to look at themselves and themselves as a child or as a parent. There's so much shame around, I'm a bad daughter, I'm a bad mother, especially for women. But also there can be, I'm a bad son, I'm a bad father. And the shame, sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's, most of the time probably it's unconscious, but it keeps you from looking at the things that need to be looked at and loved and worked through with compassion. So start with oneself. Start with yourself is my best piece of advice.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that parents should avoid making when trying to reconnect with their child?
One is reaching out before you have any clue what's going on. That can only very often just make things worse, especially if the adult child it feels that you're clueless. And then you, as the parent, are like, what's wrong? What's wrong? It's just reinforcing this belief. My parent will never get it. They're incapable. Another mistake is writing too much from your own point of view, like trying to be understood. I've often, when I look at letters that parents have written to their estranged adult children, they're pages long, like multiple pages, single spaced, margin to margin, like lots and lots and lots. And you have to realize if your adult child is keeping their distance and they're not talking to you right now, they're not going to read a 3-page letter of your thoughts. This isn't the time. So that's a big mistake, is writing out so that they will understand you. It's a very natural impulse when you feel misunderstood, and a lot of parents do feel misunderstood or unfairly judged. The natural impulse is to explain oneself. But in estrangement, it usually doesn't go well, I think it mostly just ticks people off. It's like the estranged adult child, if they're open to it, wants to be heard, wants to be understood, wants the parent to understand them. When you write 3 pages or one whole page about, here's what you need to understand about me, how sorry I am, even, if you're going to write an apology and it's like long, that then it is, the longer your missive, the more it is about you and not about them.
Yeah, like we love the effort. I think it's very good to like write out all your thoughts, but Queen, keep that in the drawer, right? Like you write it all out, get it all out on the page, and then keep it. Like you don't have to force it upon your child. And on top of that, what do you think are some situations where reaching out might cause more harm than good?
One is where the adult child has explicitly requested a timeout. Like, please don't contact me. I need some space. I need some time. I'm working on myself. Reaching out is basically saying, no, sorry, I don't respect your wishes. I'm not observing your boundaries. So that does harm, I feel, when you reach out with a no contact request. And I'll just go back to it because I really need to get it across. Reaching out, even with an apology, prematurely can do more harm than good.
Yeah, and we'll delve into some of the useful habits for parents to practice if they want to take the time to reflect and find their own peace and really think about what has gone on in the relationship. But for now, I would love to know more about maybe some proven methods of reconciliation. Are there some approaches that have proven to be more successful and well received?
Well, I don't think we have that research yet. And even when we do start delving, when researchers do start looking more at reconciliation, we're going to find that different strokes for different folks, that the bar is going to be higher or lower in different families. Different things are going to work. But one thing we know, and we've known for a long time, is that validation is, if and respect and listening are all very effective at not only de-escalating tensions, but also encouraging connection and closeness.
And what are some ways to practice the validation, respect, and active listening? What does that look like in a day to day kind of dialogue?
Well, the first thing is you may not be able to practice it with your estranged adult child, especially if they've asked for no contact, if they need some time, if they're clearly not ready. But don't sit and twiddle your thumbs. Do practice validation. There's a lot of information out there on what validation is and how to practice. I just produced a 4-series podcast that anybody can listen to. It's the Reconnection Club podcast. Anybody can find it. It's episode 198 through 201 or 2, whatever it is, 4. So how to validate. But there's lots of, there's books and stuff like that. Practice, though. I always say practice on yourself first. So what is validation? Validation is putting yourself in someone's shoes and letting them know that their feelings and their experience makes sense to you. So so if you're having an experience, even if I wouldn't feel the same way, or I don't feel the same way as you about something, if I really pay attention to you and ask you about what's going on with you, there is a way. Your feelings do make sense. I just need to listen enough to get there. I mean, if you wanted, we could come up with an example of what that might look like. But basically, you're putting yourself in the other shoes. It's empathy in action. You may feel empathy in your heart for someone, but when you validate them, you're showing that empathy. Hey, I get you. I get it. Doesn't mean I feel the same way. I may not even agree about the facts of the matter, but I understand. So that's validation. And you practice that with yourself. You practice it with people who are available to you. Respect, respect is two things. It's an emotion, which you have no control over. If you don't respect someone, I'm not going to say you can learn. No. Respect as a feeling, it's either there or it's not. But respect as a behavior is definitely a choice. So you can show respect, for example, by listening to someone who has a different opinion, by treating their opinion or their feelings or whatever it is as valid, equally valid, even if they're different from yours. By using a respectful tone, by avoiding calling names, just kind of the basics. And actually, you can read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. The way Dale Carnegie describes handling relationships is very respectful and validating, and really features listening as well. And of course, listening is something that you can work on for a lifetime. It's just not as much fun to listen as it is to talk for many of us, right?
Yeah, 100%. Unless it's someone gossiping, in which case I'm
Right.
100%,
Yes. Right.
110% there. But if a child responds positively, what is the next step? What can both parties do to rebuild the trust gradually?
That's a great question. I want to remind parents to notice when your child is responding positively. One positive response is when they say, I love you, but this and this and this. I don't have time right now. I'll get back to you when okay, that's a positive thing. It goes right over many parents. It goes right past them. Oh, do they hate me? No, it says right here, I love you. So notice when things are positive. And then the next step, you can let them set the pace. If you get the sense that they don't know what to do, you can reach out regularly, but not frequently. Regularly is not the same as frequently. So if you appear to be reconciling and nothing has happened in a few months, it's okay to reach out, but realize that the first step is not going to get you there. From what I've seen, reconciliation and all of the research and literature that we have suggests that it takes time. It takes time. There is no instant, yeah, we're back to normal. And by the way, back to normal, it's going to be a new normal, most likely. And you want that because normal is what led to estrangement. So you don't want that. So the new normal is going to take time to get used to. So I think one of the biggest things is to tolerate the awkwardness and the fact that you don't feel close anymore and that you feel like you're walking on eggshells so that it doesn't happen again. All of that is pretty normal, pretty typical when reconciliation is happening. So accept the awkwardness, realize that it's part of the process, and realize it's going to take time, and just be gentle and persistent over time.
Yeah. And on the other
And
hand, oh, sorry. Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, and if of course if your adult child says, I'll let you know when I'm ready, then let them let you know.
Yeah, that's like I feel like that's pretty much the same way in relationships as well. Like if you are on the outs with a significant other going through um some issues together and they tell you, I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk about this, you don't keep pestering them about it. Like I think it's pretty acceptable to just be like, hey, so just want to check in and see how it's going. Are you feeling up to it? If not, it's okay. We can like put it off a little bit more, whenever you're ready is fine. That kind of thing. So it's pretty similar in that sense, right?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I'm glad you talked about this because the difference is, I mean, in both cases, you're showing respect for the person's process. When you're in a committed relationship, a romantic relationship, a marriage or something, there comes a time when you might require communication for the health of the relationship. Assuming both people are committed to the relationship, the first thing, of course, is yes, to give space where space is requested, and then there's trust that the person will come back when they are ready. But if they never do, if it's always, yeah, I'll talk about this when I'm ready, and then 5 years goes by and they've never talked about anything, then you can require communication. With parents and adult children, there isn't that. Um, Especially if the adult child is estranged or has been estranged, there isn't the same commitment to the relationship. Estrangement says, I am not committed to staying close. That's what estrangement is. So, um, and also there's a power differential that rarely gets talked about. You raise a child, you diaper them, you make all the decisions for them, and then 18 years later, suddenly they're an adult and they're equals. I'm sorry, but psychologically, you are always the senior adult. You are always the person who used to sign their report cards or whatever. They never signed your report card. So it's not peers. You're not peers. So when you have, and most parents don't feel the power. The parents I work with, they don't feel powerful at all to their children at all. They feel like their child has all the power over them and they feel very small because of the estrangement. They don't recognize that as a parent, they are inherently powerful in the life of that child. And so when the child says, please give me some space, it's like speaking truth to power. It's important to respect the space as the powerful person. So that's the slight difference I see from a romantic relationship.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of insight there. And on the other hand, what should a parent do if their outreach is met with silence or rejection?
If it is, I am very sorry. It really, really hurts when that happens. And it's always a risk, especially if you've reached out before and been met with silence. I would expect, if you are estranged from your adult child right now, then when you reach out, I would expect silence. And um, I wouldn't read rejection into it. Silence can mean a lot of things. It can mean I'm not ready. I don't have time. I've got a lot going on. This is important to me, but something else is going on. It can mean I'm not sure I trust that what you're saying, I can trust it. I need more. It can mean a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily mean rejection. But when you reach out, assume that you will get silence back. Even if you write a beautiful apology or something like that, expect silence. And I wouldn't reach out if you're feeling like you're not, if you're feeling vulnerable as a parent and you just really, 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 really want to connect with your child somehow, and you reach out and then there's silence. It's like daggers. It's horrible. And sometimes parents say, I'm feeling strong. I feel like it's time. I'm going to send something. And then I might say, well, are you sure? Because, the typical response is going to be, and they're like, no, no, it doesn't matter. I don't even care if she responds at all. I just want her to know I'm sorry. I don't even care. I don't want a response. Well, a couple weeks go by, a month, and they're like, they hurt because somewhere inside they were hoping. for a response. They were hoping that their words and their heart on paper or in text would move the needle, and it doesn't. So
Yeah.
just be aware of that when you reach out to an estranged adult child or one going in that direction. You might get silence, and in many cases, it's important not to continue shouting into the silence.
Yeah. And what's one powerful insight that you've learned from working with families in long-term estrangement?
Gosh, it's such a microcosm of of society, of groups, of the world. It's just such a fascinating, rich, hugely important topic, estrangement. I guess I'm just I feel like I've learned so much about human beings. But if I had to boil it down, I might say it again. It comes back to the importance of being in touch with yourself, like really in touch with yourself, not so that you can find out what a horrible person you are. I think that's the fear, but so that you can find out what a lovable person you are. And what are all the things that, what are all the challenges that you've had, and what have you had to adapt to in the past, and how has that affected you, and how is it affecting you now? So I think it's estrangement has starts within. It starts with a certain self alienation, either in the parent or in the child or in both. I think that might be true.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's been such an insightful conversation. And I think now would be a great time to go into our break segment for today, which is worst case scenario. This is where our guest will outline the worst possible outcomes of failing to tend to a particular issue. Today's topic is family estrangement. And this is aimed at giving you an idea of the effects that a particular issue may have on individuals involved. So, Tina, let's say that a parent who is estranged from their adult child fails to address the underlying issues that led to their estrangement. What are the worst possible psychological or emotional outcomes that you've seen on both ends?
Yeah, failing to address what needs to be addressed, it drives a stake deeper and deeper and deeper into the ground, and the on the adult child side, that just the wall gets thicker and higher with every misstep of the parent. A lot, not little misstep, but a breach of trust. With every time the adult child trusts the parent to maybe do something different, and the parent over promises and under delivers, it's kind of another brick in the wall. So, and psychologically, it's devastating. I mean, the parent feels more and more helpless, more and more hopeless. The adult child, I suspect, eventually may get to a place where they give up, like really seriously give up, not just, for now, and I'm going to go distract myself and live with it, but they might actually grieve the loss of the parent, and either just not ever be open again to reaching out. But sometimes when you completely give up on someone, they lose their power over you, and then you can. So I do want to say that it's amazing what people can come back from, even in the worst case, where just parents really, and adult children, say horrible things to each other, and it's sometimes they can come back from that. It's quite surprising,
Yeah,
but
that's great.
it's so painful that, imagine it just. I guess the worst case scenario in a way is on again, off again, where each time it happens, it hurts worse, and then it's like, no way, never going to do it again.
Yeah. And what are the potential long-term effects of on the family system or future generations of having to go through this on and off kind of dynamic?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is how estrangement runs in families. Children grow up seeing their parents cut off their grandparents or their siblings, their aunts and uncles. The kids don't get to see them. And they learn that, this is a valid, viable communication strategy. If I can't work something through, and I'm not even, and they don't see anybody trying to work through things necessarily. Sometimes they do, but they learn that it's a working strategy, and so it becomes part of their toolkit when they don't know what to do in a relationship. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
that's how it runs in families.
yeah, and what should parents do to ensure that their children don't pick up those behaviors? What should they teach them about estrangement?
Hmm. I think uh, exposing children to self-reflection and to a full range of emotion about estrangement might be important, so that they know that this isn't normal, that this is a struggle, that this is not ideal, that it's not desirable, and that people can have conflicting feelings, and that people, um, can love each other and still struggle to get along. I mean, if they're going to learn estrangement, let them also learn the full depth of the human experience of estrangement, so that they have, that they have a choice later on about it. They know what they're getting into if they make that choice.
Yeah, and in your experience, what does the point of no return look like in the adult child estrangement?
I'm not sure. I don't think that's something that I could identify, because as I said, I've seen people come back from some things that I would have thought would be a point of no return, but so it's pretty hard to identify. I think when the adult child, or when the parent, when they stop and really grieve, like when the loss no longer feels ambiguous, when it becomes a full-on loss of a child or loss of a parent through estrangement, I imagine that might be a point of no return, possibly, or it could also be a different kind of beginning.
Yeah. Well, hey, I hope this gives people some hope, because our worst case scenario is about the fact that people can come back from all sorts of lows, all sorts of disastrous happenings in their relationships. So yeah, is
Yeah,
there
there's
anything else you?
definitely
Yeah.
hope. Yes, I mean, I really want people to know that most estrangements are temporary. That's what the research shows. That's my experience. I see people in the Reconnection Club all the time who I've seen people reconnect after more than 15 years. I heard from a guy who was reconnecting after 25 years with his daughter. Um, Nobody wants to take 25 years to reconnect with their child, but I don't think there's ever a time when it's too late.
Yeah, but you've got to put in the work.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and most estrangements are not 25 years. Most estrangements are shorter, and it's, I think nowadays it's harder to disappear like my grandmother did on her family. It's much harder to disappear. So
Yeah,
I
tell me
think
about it.
estrangements are right,
Been trying to
right.
disappear.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I think now would be a great time to talk about some practices and habits. We'll talk about the day to day application of what you shared with us. So, first and foremost, what habits would you recommend to parents trying to find healing and peace, and trying to reflect on the outcomes of the estrangement?
Self-focus. It is the opposite of what your nervous system and brain are telling you to do. Your nervous system and your brain are saying, reach out to that child, go chase them, run after them, because you're going to lose them if you don't. So everything in you is saying, focus on your child and fix this immediately. I am suggesting, I mean, that doesn't work. in most cases, because children don't want desperate parents running after them if they already have trouble with them. They can't fix the solution is not in the child. It's not in contact, and it's not in the child. Self-focus is where you go looking for the solutions. So try to make a habit of self-focus, and it doesn't matter how that is. If it's a body-based, a breathing practice, um, mindfulness, bringing yourself back to the present moment, having an item that you just bringing yourself back to your senses, or journaling about your experience, your feelings, your thoughts and beliefs. There are lots of good resources out there on how to use journaling constructively. And certainly reading books about psychology, going to therapy. I mean, that is the ultimate self-focus, because it should be. A lot of people tell me, oh, I can't find a therapist who specializes in adult-child estrangement. And I'm like, please don't look for that. Please look for a therapist who's focusing on you. And if they don't know anything about estrangement, great. Don't talk about that with them. Talk about it with other people. Think about it. But in therapy, the focus is on you. What is your experience? What does this estrangement mean to you? What flavor is this horrible pain? Is it abandonment? Is it rejection? Is it feeling inadequate? Is it embarrassment, stigma? Is it rage? Is it resentment? There are different flavors. What's yours?
Yeah.
And why is that what it is for you? So self-focus is the number one habit and practice that I recommend for people.
Yeah. And what about we talked a little bit before this about finding who you are as a parent outside of the parent-child relationship. So what is your advice for that? How do you think parents could go about doing that?
I want to be careful about this because many people are told, you know, go find other friends, fill your calendar with meetings or activities, join a gym. And to the parent, it feels like, I'm just trying to fill in my life, this empty hole where my child is. But nothing can fill the hole where your child is. There is no substitute for your child. So I want to acknowledge that that's not what this is about when we talk about finding out who you are and becoming more the person you're meant to be. I like to say that the parent is the foundation of the relationship with their child. And so finding yourself and really connecting to yourself forms a bridge between you and your child. It's automatic. You don't need to figure out how do I build a bridge to them. You build a bridge to you first. And you may say, well, I know myself. I'm 70 years old. I know myself pretty well. I'm a morning person. I like dogs, not cats. I eat yogurt. There are 1,000 things we know about ourselves, but the part of yourself that is when everything's quiet and whispers to you, it comes up in quiet moments when you're not busy. What's your relationship to that? That's a different kind of knowing yourself from knowing if you're a morning or a night person, or an extrovert or an introvert, right? That in the quietest moments, who are you in contact with? Who's tickled when you're laughing? Who is hurting when you're crying? That's the you to get in touch with. That connection between you and your heart, that quiet part, that's the bridge to your child. It may sound strange or like some kind of magic, but I see it. You people who have done this work feel that their relationship with their child is transformed because their relationship with themselves is transformed. They don't have to think, they don't have to walk on eggshells and think, If am I saying the wrong thing? Who knows what's going to set her off this time? That's a whole different. That's so surface level. That kind of, you know,
Yeah. And on the other hand, with coping with the grief, I don't imagine that to be very easy at all either. I think finding yourself and connecting with who you truly are, that's when your whole life you've been focusing on the things that are happening around you, and you've been focusing on your child. I can't imagine that to be very easy. And so coping with the grief while trying to find yourself is just a whole, like, it's a double struggle for sure. So what would you advise parents doing to cope with the grief, um especially, if they've been making a sincere effort and it's just not working out?
thank you for that question. And not to sound to trite or to minimize in any way, but grief is the way. Grief is a direct path to your own heart and your truth. I mean, grief is a highway, can be a highway to the real richness of you and your soul and your very being, and everything that you have to offer and everything that's beautiful and joyful about you is on the other side of that grief. I mean, uh, it may sound like a platitude. I fear that it does, but I have spoken to people um, who, you can feel that they're encased in a grief that has had no voice for decades. And there's something brittle and not functioning about it. And if and you can just once they begin to grieve, it's like, the color comes back into the picture. They're alive again. They're human. And they can breathe. Even though they're deeply, deeply sad, they can breathe again in a fuller way.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because looking back on the times where I have grieved a relationship or person or anything like that, it's always kind of injected a newfound perspective into my life in some sort of way. Not that I enjoy grieving or like,
Right,
right? Like, I don't
right.
enjoy it. Like, it's not the most pleasant experience, right? But um yeah, if you're going through it, there's always something on the other side, and it's really a lot easier said than done, for sure. When you're in it, you're not going to feel it, you're not going to want to hear it, but um it really is something that it proves that you're human. It proves that you feel this depth of emotion. So I think that's like the positive side to it. And I also want to quickly touch on some habits that might be useful for people who have successfully reconnected with their previously estranged child. What would you recommend them practicing to maintain that relationship in a healthy way?
Well, probably not surprising. Boundaries. Respecting boundaries, understanding that boundaries are not just fences, they're actually also containers, and they have doorways in them that open. Um, Boundaries are a, a subject that many people I talk to, they don't like them. Boundaries are just their only experience of boundaries is someone going like that. No, stay out. And that's unfortunate because the, I believe that parents need to have boundaries with children of any age, and especially and including adult children. So discovering your own boundaries and thinking about them, feeling about them, practicing them is a wonderful practice for a reconciling relationship. Maybe you're not always available, not in some playing a game kind of a way, but maybe you don't want to drop everything and babysit with 2 hours notice. Maybe that doesn't really work for you. If it does, it does. That's great. You don't have to set a boundary around that if you don't want to, but you're allowed. You're allowed to say no. And one thing that comes up in estrangement is adult children who are using foul language, yelling and swearing at their parents. Um, that's to me that's a hard boundary. That's a no. Like I want to hear what you have to say. How you feel matters to me. I can't hear you when you use that language. And if you continue, I'm going to have to hang up or I'm going to have to leave the room, and then do it. Parents must practice boundaries. And even if a lot of adult children say that they want their parents, certainly do want their parents to respect their boundaries, and they talk a lot about boundaries, but they may not be expecting their parents to set boundaries as well. Um, but I think that it is a good practice for parents. And remember, it's not just saying no, it's saying, here are the limits. Here's what's okay with me. Here's what I do and don't do. I don't take calls after 10 o'clock or whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be like, you have to respect my boundaries. It can just be, calm, but consistent, firm, and unwavering. It's
Yeah, that's really.
tough. I mean, it's tough for a lot of us.
Yeah, that does sound tough, especially because, you know, you're really trying to let go, and let your adult child be an independent human being and let them do what they want to do. But at the same time, you have to respect yourself and know when the behaviors uh, expressed to you aren't right, and that's not what you deserve to hear or to experience, right?
Right. But you can't set a boundary that says you must call me on certain days. That is a violation of a boundary. I can set a boundary that um, around when I take calls. I can say no calls right now, but I can't say, Marie, you have to call me on this day. If I do, that's an ultimatum. And if you ignore it, I am stuck with either also ignoring it and proving to you that my ultimatums mean nothing, or I have to impose consequences. And that may be, cutting off my nose to spite my face. So a boundary is always about what I'm willing to do or not do, rather than what you have to do in our relationship. Um,
Yeah.
so 'cause sometimes I say that because some parents say it feels abusive to be continually rejected, and it does. It feels terrible, but the boundary is that's not a boundary that we get to set. You have to call me. That we've got our yard across the street is you and your yard. I can do whatever I want in my yard. I can build a fence, not build a fence, whatever, but I can't go over to your yard and mow your lawn without your permission. Even if I want to be nice, it's going to be a boundary.
Yeah, I really want to quickly touch on like the abuse of therapy speak, or like boundary, or like calling certain things your boundary, but actually it's not really a boundary, or um, if someone says like, oh yeah, it's totally fine to not call me on this day, I'll respect your boundary, and then um act inversely of that and kind of, guilt trip or start like, yeah, making someone feel bad about not being able to call them on a certain day for whatever reason. What is your advice for like identifying these behaviors and attitudes?
It comes right back to understanding and knowing yourself. If you feel hurt, that's what it sounds like. If you want your child to call on Sunday and your child and this happens all the time, the child says, I'll call you on this day and we'll do something. And it doesn't happen and the parent feels hurt. Is that what you're talking about? And then
Yeah, in a sense. And then they'll use that and like kind of guilt trip and be like, yeah, it's all right that you didn't call me. No one ever calls me anyway. That kind of thing.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So they're not maybe so that's sort of a passive aggression thing. And I think that's just not being in touch with your actual need and at the same time not feeling like you have a right to ask for that need to be met. And in fact, you don't have a right to be called. That's not like it's not in the law. It's not like a moral thing. It's like you can ask. Um, but so when you really have a need, but you don't feel like you are allowed to ask, but you hope someone can read the need and meet it, and then you're hurt when they don't. all of that is happening um, kind of without full awareness and ownership. Where, if what ownership would look like is, I wish my daughter would call me. She said she's going to call me on this day and we're going to do something. She did that last week and she didn't call. I'm already dreading this day because I'm afraid it's going to happen again. So you're talking yourself not out of, but through the emotions that you're having. Oh, the fear, the dread, and just really sitting with it. It doesn't make it worse when you sit with your emotions. It just puts you in touch with reality. This is the truth of how you feel. And just that, there's freedom in that, there's power in that. Instead of a person who's like being beaten over the head by this feeling that you don't want to have, now you're a person who's choosing to feel the way you do. You're choosing to accept and embrace the way you feel. And like, yeah, I'm sad that I don't have a relationship. I'm sad that my daughter doesn't seem to want, or my son doesn't want to just call me and go out with me. I feel, what do I feel? Do I feel inadequate, not lovable? Now we're getting into something that's not about my child at all. It's about me not feeling lovable. And how long has that been going on? And that's where growth and healing can happen.
Yeah, that's really well said. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Tina. It's been such a nice conversation to have with you. I mean, not the actual content of it. That's pretty, it's not the best thing to talk about because it makes me sad, but it has been very, very insightful. So I appreciate that. And I hope it's been useful to our audience as well. Now I think it's the perfect time to go into open mic, which is where you'll get the chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be related to the topic, but you seem pretty passionate about this. So if you want to, you can. Yeah, take it away.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about a couple of different things, but I guess I will say a few words about constructive wallowing. That was the subject of my first book. I feel that in our culture, emotions are not privileged. They may not even be really respected, especially American culture. I'll have to say I don't know as much about Australian culture, but in the U.S., it's super, um, autonomy focused, success focused, work focused. It's pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get her done. You know, so emotions can get in the way of that. This sort of work ethic, getting ahead, being successful, and so as a culture, we have um, denigrated them to some degree. Like, got a feeling getting in the way, just move past it, brush it off, and we. It's also inconvenient when children are having a meltdown. We want them to get over it as quickly as possible, obviously. So that just there's this rampant kind of away with emotions. They're just in the way. They're not useful. And of course, you don't want to be emotional. You don't want to be emotional because that's not the way to make a good decision. All of these messages are really down on emotion, but uh, it's so much easier and simpler when in the actual day-to-day living to allow emotions their time at the table. And actually, a good decision involves emotion as well as rational thought. Both combined make the best decision. If you take emotion entirely out of a decision, you may not come to the best decision for yourself. Depends on, there's all different kinds of decisions. But apart from decision making, just dealing with emotions from day to day, we tie ourselves in knots. And people like the person I was thinking of who was grieving for years, but not really grieving, just kind of holding it together for years and years and years because he didn't have the room, the time, or the support to grieve the loss that he had. Um, we need to be able to give ourselves and our children room to have the feelings we have and trust that the feeling will move through because that's what feelings do. Bad feelings work exactly the same away as good feelings. What do good feelings do?
Yeah.
They come up and they go away. It's the same with bad feelings if we allow them to
For
move through
sure.
us.
For sure. That's such a good use of the open mic. I think emotions are everywhere all around us. We are always experiencing them to a certain extent. And if we just learned a bit more about harnessing that emotion and learning about all the different types of emotions when we feel them, reflecting on, what our attitude is, like how, certain events might trigger certain emotions in our lives, we would find it a lot easier to operate, I guess, and kind of use the emotion for good. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tina. It's been such a good experience talking to you. If our listeners want to follow your work and connect with you online, where should they go?
Thank you, Marie. It's been great talking to you too. I really appreciate our conversation. My website is Tina Gilbertson, my name.com. And for parents estranged from adult children, I have a membership website that I host, and I've made all of the everything inside of the live events and everything is kind of where I work with groups, and that's reconnectionclub.com. And we have an Instagram channel and a YouTube channel at reconnectionclub.com.
Amazing. We'll leave those in the show notes so everyone can view them. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to All Together, the Family Science Insights podcast, produced by the Family Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at fa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargent. Thanks for tuning in.